so we can get through our program. I want to welcome you all here tonight and appreciate taking time out from your busy schedules to come to our meeting. And looks like we have a great cross-section of folks. And for anybody that doesn't know me, I'm Carole Johnson, District Ranger here on the Superior Ranger District. And tonight we're going to be talking about, hello, hi Carole, nice to meet you. Come on in. We're going to be talking about the Red Bull program, which our project, which we introduced last year, a year ago. And we had a field trip during the summer and had over 50 people attend on the field trip, and there was a number of other people that just couldn't make that day. So a lot of interest, a lot of variety of interest on our field trip. And we have another year that our folks, our specialists, are going to be out there looking at Red Bull. And so we wanted to have this public meeting to get some more input from our publics, because a lot of you have been out there during this last summer, and we want to take the input that we get from you tonight as we go forward for this summer, so that we're not, a lot of times we get public input, but we get it too late in our NEPA process, and it's hard for us to incorporate some of the things that we hear and that you people want to see. So we're trying to get the public involved early in the process so that we can, maybe work better with you. And I want to thank my staff. This is one opportunity during the year that my staff is here, and you'll have an opportunity to visit in particular with them. So kind of a little bit of our format that we were going to do tonight is the specialists are going to do just a brief introduction to the different disciplines that they are involved with, and there'll be time for a few short questions, and then there'll be some questions at the end, and then the different specialists will be at the table. So if you're interested in vegetation or fire fuels or fisheries, they will have specific information, and you can go to their table where they'll have their maps and specific information, and really are going to be taking the comments that they hear from you, and we can hopefully really gain some good information from you folks that are here tonight. Also, Rachel Koch, since we got the public here, we want to take, if you have some firewood gates that you'd like to see open for firewood for the summer, Rachel's going to have a map, and she'll ask you to draw on the map so we can consider those as well. If you think of something later, give Rachel a call at the front desk and she'll take it if you think of something later. So we're going to start. I'd like to introduce Pat Partyka. Pat is our NEPA coordinator for the West Zone for both Plains and Superior districts, and she's going to explain where are we in the NEPA process with the Red Bull project, and kind of how does the NEPA process go, and where are we, and what's the process, and kind of the timelines. So Pat?
Okay. So as Carole said, I'd like to talk to you a little bit tonight about our timeline for our planning process. And so what I thought I'd do is just give you a little bit of a diagram of that process so that kind of help you visualize where we are right now in our planning horizon. So I call this our planning triangle. We start on the left-hand side in the bottom left corner, and we work clockwise around, and that's what I'll be describing. The red arrows there are key points where the public can be involved in our process, and so that's what I'd like to also highlight as I'm going through this. So the left side of the triangle is really our proposal development. It's trying to get a good sense of a project, an area. Our folks spend a lot of time out in the field identifying what the existing condition is out there. So all the different resource disciplines are collecting data, information to understand what it is out there, what's the existing condition. And so we bring that information back, and then we compare that to our forest plan's desired future condition. And our forest plan is the framework that basically is how we manage the Lowland National Forest. And so where we have a disconnect between what the existing condition is and what our desired future condition is, it kind of gives us an idea that, hey, there might be a need here to do something. And so that's where we come up with the terminology purpose and need. It identifies the need to do something. And so as part of our exploration process out there and identifying what's in the field, we identify opportunities to meet that purpose and need. And so that's kind of where we are right now in the process. So we're just kind of halfway up the left-hand side of the triangle. So we've identified some needs out there, we've identified some opportunities out there. Now, sometimes there's multiple opportunities, there's multiple ways to achieve that purpose and need. And that's where you all are coming in here in this collaboration stage where that red arrow is. That's what we're going to be asking for your input, because there are multiple ways to achieve that purpose and need. And trying to get your ideas early, as Carole said, so that we can incorporate that and explore those options as we move forward. And at the end of this, working collaboratively, we need to get to a proposed action, which is at the top of the triangle. And the proposed action is basically a starting point for the rest of the public to kind of say, so for us to go out and say, here's what we're thinking about. What do you guys think? And so this proposed action is kind of the what we're thinking about, why we're doing it, how we're going to do it, when we're going to do it, where we're going to do it. And then we send that information out to the general public for scoping. And at this point in our timeline, we're thinking that's going to be almost a year from now. So in a year from now, we'll send out a letter that will describe our proposed action, and then we're generating comments from the public. We want those comments to come back to us, and then we'll generate alternatives to that proposed action. And that's what all the different resource specialties will be doing in that next year, is analyzing the effects of those alternatives on their respective resources. And we'll yard all that information up and publish all that information in the environmental document. And at this point, we think that's going to be an environmental impact statement just based on the complexities of the area that we know so far. And that would be about March 2019. So a year from now, or 2 years from now, we're looking at publishing a draft environmental impact statement. And that's another opportunity for the public to get involved, is to provide comments to that document. And we will take those into consideration, and a decision will be made. And that kind of leads into the last opportunity for public comment or participation, is the objection period. So folks can object to the decision that the responsible official will make. And so when we finally get through all that process, we're looking at implementation maybe about August of 2020. And so yes, that's about 3 years out. And so you might wonder, why does this take so long? Well, Carole, I don't know if you said this, but this project area is 85,000 acres in size. And the National Forest System land itself is about 81,000 acres. So it's a really big area to be considering looking at and evaluating. The other thing, I don't know if folks know this, but most of the planning team is zoned between Plains and Superior. And we work on both districts. And at any given time, we're usually working on 5 different projects. So it's very difficult for us to go through this process so much faster. But I guess what I want to say is, despite this, what seems to be a long timeline, I hope that you'll continue to be engaged in our process. Because as Carole said, the more information you can do that we can gather from you, and we can work together on the left-hand side of the triangle, it just makes it so much easier as we move around, that we can be able to incorporate your comments, explore some different options that maybe you have ideas on, more so than as we get further down through the process. So if you have any questions more about planning on this project or anything else that we've got going on in the zone, just let me know. I'll be around after all the presentations. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. We're really fortunate because Pat is one great NEPA person, and there's not a lot of people that have the mastery of that NEPA process as well as Pat does. And, she keeps our projects moving just about as quickly as we possibly can. And it's my hope that all of you that have so much interest and passion in this area will help us develop the proposed action and help us develop the alternatives. instead of us just always coming up with them. And of course, we get some of that from the comments from scoping, but I'm really hoping that we're going to hear as we continue through the project that you folks will really have a major part in helping us develop those. So with that, this project was really started as these were some critical watersheds for bull trout. And so that was the primary purpose when we started into the NEPA process with the Red Bull project. And I'm going to turn it over to our Fisheries Biologist, John Hansen, and our Hydrologist, Dustin Walters, to give you a little bit of background about why these watersheds in the Red Bull area are so important. So, John and Dustin.
Thank you, Carole. So like Carole said, one of those needs for the Red Bull project is really based around fisheries and bull trout in particular. So to kind of step back even farther from the Red Bull project and give you a sense of what bull trout are within Mineral County. Within the county, there's 6 tributaries where bull trout reside, or at least where critical habitat was designated. Critical habitat bull trout are both listed under the Endangered Species Act in 1998. So like them, love them, hate them. One of the requirements of the Endangered Species Act on federal agencies was that we have to carry out programs to conserve, to protect, and enhance bull trout. So within Mineral County, there are 6 tributaries that are designated as critical habitat. So it's not the whole county, it's not every stream. To break that down even more, I would classify those tributaries that are really important to bull trout, have some of the stronger populations as Little Joe, Cedar Creek, and then Fish Creek within the county. So the approach for Red Bull is let's focus on those important places for bull trout. So a lot of our fisheries improvements are focused on the Little Joe for this project. Little Joe has a pretty strong resident population of bull trout. There's also some migratory use, and those are the large fish that come in, spawn in the fall, and then go back out to the Clark Fork. So some of those metrics that we're really focusing on are habitat within Little Joe. So we're really looking at clean, cold, connected, complex type of habitats, and those are the metrics that we want to target to really improve.
So yeah, unlike John, I find you guys to be an intimidating group, so I needed a cheat sheet here. So, so basically, we really kind of zeroed in on the Little Joe and Ward in terms of trying to assess what kind of condition those streams are in, and just from research and from our experience, we have found that some of the main things that may degrade a stream's quality, water quality, or fish habitat are excessive sedimentation, loss of large weighted debris or log jams, loss of riparian vegetation, and just decreased channel complexity or decrease in habitat. So we went about trying to assess those things in those stream channels, and we looked at channel complexity using PIBO surveys, which are standardized fish habitat surveys used all over the West, and we did surveys in all 3 of those streams, the North Fork, South Fork of Little Joe and Ward. And generally speaking, we found that fish habitat was in fairly good shape further up the drainages. As you move down in the drainages, the habitat tended to decrease. I think a lot of those cumulative watershed effects will start to kind of sort out as you got further down. And we also looked at large weighted debris in all these streams, and we did that by just basically walking the streams. We get to a log jam, we would catalog it, we would take a GPS point, pictures, count the number of logs in it to get an idea of what kind of density of log jams there are. And again, we found that there was a pretty good, the streams, none of these streams in general were lacking for large weighted debris. There was actually a fair amount in them. Ward probably had the most, and then the South Fork, Little Joe, and then the North Fork, Little Joe had the least. But we did find some areas where they could be enhanced with a little more wood. And then in terms of sediment analysis, to try and look at just how much additional sediments coming into the streams, we were able to use a lot of the DEQ data. So the North Fork, Little Joe, and the main stem Little Joe are currently listed on the 303D list for sediment from the road systems. Ward Creek was previously listed, but it was delisted a couple years ago. But we also covered all the road systems in the entire watersheds by driving or walking them. And we were literally looking at the roads for points where sediment would leave the roads and following those into the stream channels. So we actually have points on every single road system that we call contributing sediment sources. And so we consider those the sources of sediment from the road system into the stream, and we did that for every road. And we found that mainly the riparian roads, which isn't a big surprise, this is what the research tells us also, which would be in the South Fork, Little Joe, the 221 road, in the North Fork, Little Joe, the 282 road, and in Ward Creek, the 889 road, just those main bottom roads, were the ones who had the most sediment contributing points. Again, Ward probably had the least, and then the South Fork, Little Joe, and the highest concentration was definitely on the North Fork, Little Joe, which, as we all know, is a really wide road, well used, and so that shouldn't be very surprising. So that's the main thing we found in terms of stream channel conditions. And John is going to talk about the South Fork and what we might do to improve it.
So, probably can't see this great. So after all of the presentations are given, the maps around the room, come look at the maps and you can dive into some more of the details. So we're going to look just really quick. Yeah, that'll work. Looking at the Little Joe, South Fork Little Joe right here, North Fork here. I'm just going to run through some of the opportunities that we identified that we feel would be the most kind of bang for your buck from a fisheries aspect. These purple kind of diamonds here are places along the South Fork where there's just no channel complexity. So there's long reaches, there's no pools, it's over widened, there's not a lot of quality characteristics for bucktrout or cutthroat. So we could go into these areas and do in-stream treatments like adding wood to create some pools, actually changing the channel from where it's at if there's room into an old channel, some of those things to get some of those complexities back within the stream. Also in the South Fork, there are these little orange kind of lines along this section of the South Fork, and then up farther up here as well. And those are areas where we have identified that the road is having a fairly significant impact on the stream, and there is room to actually realign the road, so to push that road up against the hillside or just up on the hillside a little bit to give that stream more room to move to access its floodplain, to have vegetation and trees grow up to provide some shade, to provide some large wood, to address some of those issues. Also, there are these little red points with fish in the middle of them all over the map here. Those are culverts, so roads crossing streams, and those culverts are a combination of they're too small to actually to handle high flows. We might see a fair bit of that this year. And so we would like to replace those culverts both to increase the capacity of those so that we don't have roads blowing out and sediment entering the stream. And then also those are fish barriers. So certain times of the year, fish cannot move back and forth through those culverts. Another action that I have identified as an opportunity on the South Fork is from this intersection right here on the South Fork up to just below where Moore Lake Road takes off, an opportunity to decommission and convert that to an actual trail. At the same time, opening up one of these alternative routes from the North Fork so that we still have access to Moore Lake. So decommissioning, convert to trail this, and then the option to drive up here, connect back into Moore Lake, but still come down and do the Dry Creek loop as well. So basically be changing that access to the upper Little Joe area.
Steve?
May I ask a question?
You bet.
You're saying propose changing that, decommission that. How, and you're making it a trail. What is it, a walking trail?
At this point, it's just an opportunity. So that's the exact kind of feedback that we want. Is we've said, this is a great opportunity for fisheries to decommission that, convert it to a trail. The type of trail, that's what we want to hear from you guys. Or if that's a good idea, or if it's not. I mean, these are just the things that we've identified. So.
And keep in mind, John and Dustin and everybody here tonight, they're just talking about opportunities, and these are opportunities that they see for their respective resources. We want to hear some opportunities from you people, and no decisions have been made at this point whatsoever. So, keep that in mind.
Well, I don't know if I need the pointer. So I was going to talk about the North Fork, then John's kind of covered the South Fork, which is... South Fork is the area that we identified as the one we would put the most energy and effort into to do improvements for the stream and for fish habitat. The North Fork is, you guys all know that. Everyone's driven it, I'm sure, and it's a pretty small valley with a pretty big road in it and not much room for the stream. So, we want to reduce a lot of those road-stream interaction issues. And what we would do primarily is just do upgrades on the 282 road. So that would include narrowing it, probably throughout it. It's over-widened throughout the entire stretch of that road. Resurfacing it, probably put a 6-inch or so lift on it, get some more coarse material on the surface so we don't have as many fines going into the stream. We would want to increase the drainage, so additional culverts on it to just help it drain better, and just do some erosion control, which would be like wattles or slash filter windrows, things like that. And then we did identify a couple small areas, maybe 1,000, 1,500 feet, where we could actually shift that North Fork road over further away from the stream, kind of Cedar Creek style, or what we would be proposing in South Fork. Not a whole lot there though. And then we would want to do AOP upgrades, so culvert upgrades on the two main crossings on the 282 road. In terms of work we would do in the stream channel in the North Fork, we did identify a few places where we might want to put some more wood in. We need to go and relook at those in the field to see how feasible they are. Possibly some stinger planting along the edge of the road, just to get a vegetative filter in there. And we also identified some areas in the North Fork. Since there's less of an opportunity to move the road, we actually found some areas where we may be able to move the stream further from the road to provide a little bit more of a buffer. So some of that type of work in the North Fork also. And then in some of the wreck sites, we thought we would just do some hardening or improving of those to reduce erosion out of those into the stream channel. And then Ward Creek also has probably even less than the North Fork. Like I said, it's in a lot better shape than any of these other streams. And we'd mainly be looking at the 889 road for just road BMPs. A lot of the similar stuff that I just mentioned on the North Fork road would just be resurfacing, probably not the whole length of it, just probably spot graveling and stuff like that. Some narrowing, again, not the whole length. There are just a few areas that are over widened, and some additional drainages and possibly some minor realignments on that road also. And then we have several, all the red dots up there are several AOPs, several fish culverts that can be upgraded in Ward Creek. And then in terms of what we would propose in the stream, very little in Ward Creek, maybe some spots for large wood debris, but that may end up falling out as a really low priority because it's in pretty good shape, to be honest. And then we would want to address a few of the dispersed wreck sites in there in terms of hardening them to decrease the erosion also. So that's kind of it.
So to the north part of the Joe, if we're going to do some meaningful work in there for sediment control, why don't we pave it? you have put gravel down there 3 or 4 times that I know of. And in that same length of time, the Idaho side has repaved theirs, I think, twice. You know, they have the same issues on the Idaho side, they don't have the boat out issue, but they have fish in that river.
Yeah, I mean, we would love to pave it. We talked about that a lot on the field trip, and I don't know if you want to address that, Carole, or whoever the engineers, but
I think Brian will talk a little bit
yeah,
about that.
I think Brian will probably talk a little bit about that. You're spot on. We would love to do that. It's just, we don't have, 15 million sitting in our pockets. So,
Well, we did
you
at
know.
one time, and then the
We
grizzly
did.
bear shot it down.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
we were there, and instead, Pennycreek got paid.
So Dwayne, and on the field trip and throughout public comments, there's been a lot of comments, people would like to see that paved. So,
I don't think that we can give up on that.
I don't think we can either, and there's just for a lot of reasons.
Yeah.
I mean, for the commerce coming into St. Regis and the recreational travel and a lot of reasons.
And I don't think from, a sediment reduction perspective, we're giving up on it either. But I think we also recognize that if that does happen, we're still a ways out on it, and we fully know that the improvements we want to do won't be permanent improvements, for sure.
Glenn?
Yeah, my comment was similar with all the work done by the Federal Highway Administration for years, and public meetings in this room, and changes in the surveys, and then the bull trout, and grizzly, and lynx, and all of those things that the Federal Highway Administration had to consider. In order to change the alignment to make it pavable, isn't there a fair amount of work that would need to be done, engineering-wise, and maybe Brian can talk about that. And that would cause extra disturbance in the short term, but in the long run, it'd be better, if I understood. But then, yeah, where's the money?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, let Brian talk to that. We surely wouldn't do anything to that road that would preclude it from being paved in the future. But my understanding, that previous proposal was kind of a pave in place, so they actually weren't going to do a whole lot of more realigning or straightening of the road as it was.
Kim?
You talk about changing the route of the road going from the North Fork over the Sunset Ridge down to the South Fork. That's a very, very bad road, and it would take a lot of money. Paving would be far cheaper, but the other thing is, how valuable are the bull trout? Nobody eats them.
I don't. I eat beef.
Like I said, in that first slide, like them, hate them or not, they're a listed species under the Endangered Species Act. That's the current law that, we have to operate under, just like everybody has to operate under as far as keeping them or not. And that's what we're doing here. We're trying to do that, preserve what we have, improve things, and at the same time trying to show that doesn't mean that we preclude other activities. Finding that balance of how can we preserve those, whether you want to or not, and still do all of these other things for other resources. I mean, that's the predicament. That's the difficulty.
Okay, you have a portion of the main Joe Creek, say from half a mile from the St. Regis River to a mile. It's running against the clay bank. And when it passes that, it comes out chalk white. When it started clear, a mile above that. Why don't you do something about that?
If we know the landowners, we should be talking to them as well. That's down on some of that private there.
Okay, spend some money with the private people if you want to fix the creek, don't just pass it.
No, that's the intent of this, is where I don't think we're passing anything. We're looking at the opportunities. We're looking at where is the best bang for the buck. There are reaches within the little Joe that are more important than others at certain times of the year. So we want to take all of that into consideration.
Yeah, no, we would certainly propose to do some work on the private land. We would need to work with the, the DNRC and the FWP to get that accomplished, but that's a good idea.
Okay, we're going to move on to our next presentation. I want to thank John and Dustin. And this project has caught the eye of people nationally. And I heard last year on our field trip from people that represented all ends of the spectrum was that we're going to come together, there'll be a little arm wrestling, but we're going to come together and we're going to get it done and make a project that's going to benefit a lot of the resources out there. And I truly believe that we can do that. And knowing that it's from Dry Creek clear to Ward Creek, kind of the heart of the district, obviously there's a lot of vegetation out there. So Carly's going to tell us what she's seen. She and Bruce have been out there for 2 summers. They've got another summer out there, and so she's going to tell us what she's seen. Carly Annabali, our silviculturist. Carly?
Thank you, Carole. Excuse me. So with this project, like has been mentioned previously, this is a big bull trout emphasis. We went in there with bull trout in mind, trying to do the best by that species. So from a vegetation standpoint, when we went into this project area looking at all the potential opportunities, we were given a set of sideboards from Fisheries that kind of keep it in the back of our heads just as a pre-screen, if you will, making sure that we weren't going to do anything that was going to make things that much worse right off the get-go. Looking at a couple of those sideboards being where we were proposing roads, what we were proposing to build, whether it was a temp road or a permanent new road, that sort of thing, proper placement, and whether we really needed to leave it long-term on the landscape. We also looked at some of the potential haul, and one of the sideboards was trying to avoid haul down the South Fork as best we could. So kind of being strategic with where we considered our vegetation treatments. So with that in mind, we went out there kind of as a general, idea of improving resilience on the landscape. As you all know, it's the case with most forests in western Montana, northern Idaho. We've had 100 years of fire exclusion, and that's had some impacts on the landscape. So trying to improve resilience to disturbance is really what we looked at in these forested stands, so across the Red Bull landscape. So looking at responses to fire, insects, disease, so root disease, that sort of thing. Trying to make these stands as healthy as we can so we have productive timber, healthy watersheds, clean water. It all kind of feeds back into each other. So that's what we were looking at when we were out there. And a couple of things we identified. Some ponderosa pine restoration, a lot of the dry sites we're looking at very closely. A lot of those were historically a lot more open grown, large ponderosa pine, fire maintained ecosystems that have, since fire exclusion, filled in a lot with a lot more Doug fir than would have historically existed in those. So looking at treating some of those, really increasing the amount of ponderosa pine on the landscape since it is a very fire tolerant tree. Focusing on that. We also looked at a lot of western larch restoration, some of those more mesic sites, those wetter sites, where you get a mix of larch and Doug fir. A lot of those are converting without fire, as larch is also a fire tolerant tree, independent on fire. Without fire in the ecosystem, it's starting to convert to a lot of shade tolerant species. The Doug fir is really starting to push out the larch. You're getting a lot of grand fir in there as well. In some sites, you're getting your hemlock, your subalpine fir as well, which are not as resilient. They don't respond well to fire. They respond well. They burn very well. Insect and disease, same thing. They don't really hold their own very well against that sort of thing on the landscape. So trying to really push those sort of sites to larch as best we can. It's a great species, and it holds its own against a lot of stuff. So focusing on those stands as well. Go for it. As I mentioned previously, as a whole, without fire, you're looking at a lot of excuse me, stands converting to shade-tolerant species, your grand fir, your hemlocks, Doug fir, subalpine fir. So just as a whole, looking at the landscape and where we're seeing that conversion, that loss of resilient species, your pine larch, white pine. We're also identifying stands where, due to fire exclusion, you have way too many stems out there. There's no natural thinning that's occurred to let those stands, to allow them growing states, essentially. So you're getting a lot of stagnated stands. What that does is you end up with a lot of stress trees. They're a lot more susceptible to insects and disease, again, and they're nice little thickets for fire to run through as well. So going out, identifying those for treatment, for thinning to increase individual tree resilience and vigor. So we have better growing trees, healthier trees, and can stand up to a lot more. There's also a whole host of insect and disease activity out there. So in this case, stands and hillsides where we're seeing western larch dwarf mistletoe, which it's a native plant pathogen. It attacks western larch, and it does affect their growth, their overall vigor, and their longevity over time. So in trying to keep these species on the landscape, looking at those stands that are heavily infected with mistletoe and trying to figure out the best treatments as well. So, go for it. Just some other issues we identified out there in terms of looking at the existing condition and just kind of what's the state of the landscape, if you will. We're looking at the bark beetle hazard in stands, the potential mortality, whether that's western pine beetle, mountain pine beetle in your lodgepole, and your ponderosa pine, and Doug fir beetle as well. It's got its own little beetle. And then looking at root disease, that's really a big issue up here because we have so many of our shade-tolerant species are extremely susceptible. And once it's there, it just keeps eating away at them. So seeing what we can do to convert it to pine and larch, which tolerate it a lot more. So trying to, again, maintain those species, convert stands to healthy stands of timber. It's in our forest plan that we are to maintain healthy stands of timber. So that's what we're looking at. We're also out there in stands assessing for hazardous fuels, kind of looking at the condition, and I'm sure Lori will get into it a little bit more when she talks about fuels and fire. But when we're out there, we're assessing risk within the stand from our perspective of, it's not just kind of wildfire moves through the public lands, but are we going to lose the stand when a wildfire moves through? Wildfire can be beneficial in a lot of these landscapes, especially after 100 years without it. It can do some damage, as you all well know. So trying to make it so these stands will not only survive fire, but thrive when it goes through fire. So assessing for that as well. Some other opportunities we've identified, we're looking at some of the higher elevations for white bark pine suitability. It is also a sensitive species within the region. I'm sure you guys have all heard about white pine blister rust. It's attacked the white bark pine, knocked them out. So trying to get them back where appropriate, where we can. It's not a species of commercial value, but it is a species with a lot of value within the ecosystems. So it's very important. So trying to get that back where we can, where opportunities exist to plant it or to improve conditions within the stand so it'll be maintained as well. This is a huge project. This huge project area is probably one of our best opportunities so far, what we've looked at for restoring western white pine on the district. It's probably got the most suitable ground I've seen in you guys know there's still some up there, some big ones up there. So also with white pine blister rust knocked out a lot of our western white pine once it was introduced. So trying to get those species back onto the landscape as well is also a focus of this. We've got a lot of suitable ground to work with. We've also looked at potential for aspen restoration. A lot of it's, let's see, in the Little Joe, there's a couple clones, and then in the Dry Fork area, just identifying areas where we can do improvements on those clones and kind of expand their area a bit. And then one of the other things, just as a general landscape perspective, when we're going out here looking at the existing condition, we kind of assess the the historic condition or what would have existed there prior to European settlement, because that will tell us what, essentially it was a self-maintaining system. It was resilient all on its own. So we use that as kind of our check back of what is a resilient system. And one of the things we found on all the landscapes so far across the district, and this one is no exception, is a lack of H-class diversity. So without fire breaking up the forest and breaking up that landscape into different chunks and pieces with all different ages and sizes, it all becomes susceptible to the same insects, disease, all at once. So when you have something move through, it does a lot more damage than if you got kind of a puzzle piece thing going on. So looking at increasing H-class diversity through regeneration harvests, trying to reinitiate some younger H-classes on the landscape. So that's kind of just the general broad overview of what we're looking at. It's kind of a lot, and we have by no means done yet. There's like Carole said and Pat said, there's a lot of ground to cover. We've started and we've got some specifically. I didn't have a map of units. When we break out into specialist groups, you guys can come back and we can talk about individual pieces of ground if you'd like. And I can tell you what I've seen, and you can tell me what you guys would like to see out there. And I really welcome your feedback. So, thank you.
Carly, what is the average age of the stands in the Red Bull area?
So far, what we've seen. Sorry, my mouth's going dry. Depending on the area you're in, you're either seeing 1910 or later. So everything is pretty much 100 years old or older, and some of these are 160-year-old stands. So it's a lot of old trees out there.
Old trees,
I mean,
okay.
they're still really healthy, a lot of them, but it's on an average an older landscape that hasn't seen anything really breaking it up in a while. So hopefully doing something about that.
Thank you, Carly. And like she said, she's already put a lot of boot tracks on that landscape, and as Pat told you, it's 80-some thousand acres. And so by the time we're done with this, there won't be much of that ground that Carly won't have put boot tracks on. So she covers the ground out there. So we're going to follow up now with fuels and fire. And you all remember the Little Joe fire that we were thinking had potential to get down here to St. Regis. So Lori's going to tell you what she's seen from fuels out there. Lori Cotter.
I actually got a picture of the Little Joe fire here in a minute coming up. All right, so I'm the fuels FMO, so I really focus on the prescribed burning in the spring and in the fall, and then during the summertime when I'll just become firefighters out there. So we do, in this project in particular, there'll be probably 4 different types of prescribed burning that you'll see out there on the landscape. So low severity burning, most people are pretty familiar with this one. It's, those nice open pine stands. I wish most of our ground was that gentle. This was actually taken from just up Mayo Gulch. Most of the stuff around here is a whole lot steeper than that. But it's the stuff that we try to maintain with fire. Like Carly said, this is a very fire-dependent ecosystem. There should be fire out there, and yes, we're the ones that actually put them out too. But in the spring, when we can control them, we really like to get as much fire out of the ground as we can. So there'll be quite a bit of that. We mainly focus on the south faces, the open pine stands, those types of things. Next. So the next type of burn that we really are starting to do quite a bit more is we call it mixed severity burning. For those of you familiar with the area, and I know most of you are, we're actually looking at up there kind of at the top, that's the Little Joe Peak. So those are those openings up there above the Little Joe. So really it's that high elevation, not a lot of commercial value there. We're looking at expanding those openings, the brush fields. They're really the brush in those brush fields are really decadent. Haven't seen fire. But the point there is not to kill a lot of trees. We will kill trees on the fringes of those openings to try to get those openings to be bigger because they're really getting encroached. So we want those openings to expand. But we really don't expect to see, when I say I'm going to go burn this too, I don't expect to make that whole area black. That's not the intent. It's really mosaic. We'll burn patches within the timber, focus on the brush fields, But it's not a 100%, it's not like a wildfire out there that just goes and just turns that thing totally black. It's not what we're trying to do. And it's really to enhance, when we go out there and do these types of burns, it really enhances the grass and the brush. It top kills the brush, and then the big game, especially particular elk and mule deer, really like the browse that comes back up from it. So, next. So the next type that we do is that mixed severity, but it's more that dead, dying, and down lodgepole. So this is the stuff that when you're out there hunting and you hit a wall of dead lodgepole that's either knee deep or eyeball deep, and you say there's no way I'm going in there. That's the kind of stuff we're trying to focus on. We really, again on these ones, we draw big circles, but we really burn smaller holes. So I might draw on the map, you'll see a circle that starts from the ridge top that goes to the creek bottom. But again, not going for 100% black in that area. All we're trying to do is hit areas that look like this and clean that stuff up so that there's not that hazardous fuels concentrations out there. Those darker, thicker timbers that are healthy and that have, they're just healthy, that's not what we're trying to burn out there. We just want to hit the patches of this dead and dying lodgepole. That is just, again, it's that stuff that you can't even walk through. And then the fourth kind of burning that we do, and there'll be a lot of it, is the activity unit burning. I'm sure you've all seen most of that. And the main focus of that is just really to clean up the logging slash. And it does kind of have twofold too. It does, like Carole says, it really breaks up the landscape, and it provides a lot of, when we do have large fires move through the area, it breaks up that continuity. And then if we clean up the logging slash, it really helps us be able to get in there and actually put the fire out because you're not seeing as severe a wildfire behavior. So, last picture. All right, so since the ransom stats, since 1980, there have been 197 wildfires in the Red Bull area.
That was amazing to me when I saw your slide this afternoon.
Yeah. So, and if you're curious, they're all on a dot back here on our map, so you can see all that. And also back here on this map, it's actually quite interesting. We showed all the fires of like 1910, 1919, because a lot of this area did burn in either 1910 or 1919. So large fires are back here, and then all the fires from 1980 on. So, go ahead.
On your burning, do you allow harvest before you burn, or do you burn first?
It depends. On the activity ones, it's always after harvest. The low severity ones, it really just depends. If they can get in there and harvest it first, then that's obviously the best option, and we do try to do that. But sometimes even on those wide open south faces, when we go and do a maintenance burn in there, we hardly have any mortality at all to the overstory trees. It's actually to help their, what's what I'm looking for here. It helps them. It's a good for the tree. It's good for everything out there. And then the mixed severity stuff, a lot of that high elevation stuff like the brush fields, a lot of times it's not areas that's conducive to timber harvest at all. Anyway, so it really just depends. I know that's a terrible answer, and I'm sorry, but it really depends on the landscape, whether or not we're going to harvest it or not.
So do you consider that when you plan your burn?
Yes, we definitely do. And you'll see a lot of, when you look at the maps, you'll actually see where there's units, and then you'll see another layer over top of those where we're going to burn over top of them too. Or we'll burn the unit and then we'll go even bigger. We'll try to expand it into a larger area where we can it's actually more cost efficient to do it that way.
Thank you.
Do you have the acreage that would have been with those 197 starts since 1980?
I do. I don't have them with me. We just put them on the map, but I can get that. And I can tell you that I know historically from the last 3 projects that I've done, you look at like the 1910, the 1919, even a lot of fires in the 1930s, and they were big. And most of them from the 1980s on have all been really lit.
And really, most of those 197 fires were the ones that were caught initially and didn't get over 5 acres. So every one of those 197 fires we kept under 5 acres. If that helps the picture a little bit.
So 1930s, what size of fires might we have seen in here, Lori?
Well, if you look on the map, I mean, you're, a couple thousand acres or bigger.
Or bigger?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then, and just so, the picture of the Little Joe fire, that was, if you guys all remember, the story on that one is, I think that fire sat up there for 2, 3, probably 4 days before anybody saw it, called it in. I mean, we were even flying patrols, but it was so smoky that nobody could see it. And, that's the main Little Joe Road, and it was right there. And what it did is it hit a patch of that dead, dying, and down lodgepole, and it just took off. And then what it got into was, that whole upper end is just all that, eyeball deep, dead, dying, and down lodgepole. And then 2 days after this thing got that big, because it did that in one night, there was supposed to be a very, very large wind event coming in, which is why we were so concerned about the town of St. Regis, because if that wind event would have actually came to fruition, that thing would have got a whole lot bigger. But the wind, it didn't really hit us, which was good.
And it kind of sat up on itself.
Yep, yeah, so it really didn't get too much bigger. I think the Little Joe got about 300 acres. So that's probably been our biggest fire since probably the 1930s in this project area. So,
Okay, thank you, Lori. Next, we're going to have Dave Robleski, our wildlife biologist, talk to us a little bit about the wildlife in the area.
Hi, my name is Dave Robleski. I work out of Plains, but since 2013 I've been covering both Plains and Superior. So I have kind of 3 goals for wildlife in this project area. As John was saying, of fisheries, we're required to assist in the recovery of threatened and endangered species. We have 2 wildlife species, lynx and grizzly bears, that may be in the project area. Secondly, we're supposed to manage habitats for long-term population stability of all vertebrate species. And then lastly, manage habitats to maintain and enhance populations of game species. So first, grizzly bear, this goes to the threatened species issue. Both grizzly bear and lynx are considered threatened. For grizzly bears, we don't really expect grizzly bears to be very common in the project area. They may move through the project area. There's really no specific management needs for grizzly bears in the project area. There's no forest plan direction or grizzly bear recovery plan direction that says this is an area we're supposed to specially manage for grizzly bears. So essentially, when we get around, like Pat Partyka was saying, when we get around to that environmental analysis part of the project, I need to write out and explain the potential effects on grizzly bears or on a grizzly bear that may move through the project area to Carole for her decision. But otherwise, grizzly bears aren't really factoring into the proposed action and what we're looking at for this project at all. Moving on to lynx, generally, again, kind of poor habitat for lynx. Some of the more recent scientific papers on lynx don't even identify this as a part of their range. But the way our policy is written, the whole global national forest is lynx range, and we're supposed to meet certain management obligations. And so we have, it's very likely there's just too much hemlock, granite fir, warm and moist in this area, not enough subalpine fir. We did do some snowshoe hare pellet surveys in order to assess snowshoe hare densities out here last year, and the results indicated that we're kind of on the bottom end of what really could support lynx, and that's in some of the best habitats we could find. So again, lynx aren't going to really be a driver in any sort of pieces of this project. But definitely, we have the forest plan amendment that says that there's certain things we have to do or that we can't do for lynx, and those kind of get that kind of stuff gets factored in at the beginning, and without amending our forest plan, there's really no way to get around any of that stuff. So generally, it's not going to be a huge driver in the project. A bigger driver in the project will be elk. We're looking at both summer and winter range. The more recent literature is talking about the importance of elk summer range in sort of the year-round health of the population. So as Lori was talking about, and Carly, we're looking at increasing forage through harvest and fire in areas of high vegetation growth. So we're able to kind of map out the most productive areas, which are the areas where elk are spending more time in the summer, and then essentially looking for areas nearby there where we can punch holes in those older hillsides in order to get some more forage back in there and really help that elk population year round by helping summer range. So again, like Carly was talking about, and Lori, very little disturbance in the project area over the past 100 years or whatever. So really, I'm looking for areas to bring in more disturbance and sort of better balance those age classes as well. And then winter range, fairly typical to what we do on a lot of our projects, maintaining grass and shrub forage in those low elevation, south-facing slopes. Usually it's fire, oftentimes there's harvest mixed in with it, depending on the condition of those stands that we're starting with. So, and then the last two things I'm kind of considering as we go into this project, wolverines are proposed for federal listing. They very likely, according to our habitat mapping, and they sure move around a lot, but the project area is, especially the upper portions of the project area along the state line, has some of the better habitat in Montana, and so they very likely are around. But they're proposed for federal listing. Fish and Wildlife Service hasn't made a decision on that yet, and there's really not a whole lot that we would be proposing that are going to have a whole lot of effect on them. And on the flip side, there's not a lot we could propose that is going to make things better for them. So again, not a huge driver for the project. Lastly, Fisher. Most of you guys are probably familiar with what they are. They're just a big pine marten. But they're a sensitive species currently, and there's been a handful of petitions to U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to list them, and that's gone back and forth, courts and stuff like that. And so there's always a potential. They're right on the edge of potentially being listed. They've definitely found in the project area. We got some DNA from one last winter. Did some surveys again this winter looking for lakes, wolverine, and fisher. Didn't find anything at all this winter, but it was a very good survey winter. So what we want to do with Fisher, what I've been thinking for Fisher, they're very keyed in on older, bigger forests, complex forests and stuff. And so from one sense, you can look at a project area like this and say, whoa, we can't do any cutting or anything like that. On the flip side, though, we missed 1910, but I'm sure 1910 removed a whole lot of fisher habitat from these drainages. And so, like Carly was saying, we want to line ourselves up so that if or when we have that type of event again, that we don't wipe out 3 drainages and remove every stick of habitat that's out there. We kind of balance the amount of different age classes and everything in hopes that, if we have big fire events, we can maintain some habitats and some will obviously burn up. So just trying to shift that blend of forest age classes more toward what we had historically than what we have currently. So a lot of the wildlife stuff simply just lines up real well with the fire and the vegetation stuff. So, that's it.
Thank you, Dave. Okay, Heather? I'd like to introduce Heather to you. Heather is our new resource assistant for Plains Thompson Falls and for Superior Ranger District. She replaces Beth Kennedy, who many of you knew, that retired in October. And Heather comes to us from the Lincoln National Forest out of New Mexico, and she just arrived in Superior in about the middle to the end of January. So she has not had an opportunity to get out in the Red Bull area, but she will be this summer, and is aggressively trying to work with a lot of you and a lot of the organizations already in the county as far as looking at recreation opportunities and what you'd like to see on the Superior Ranger District. And so I just want to introduce Heather to you.
Hi everyone, nice to meet you all. Some of you I've met already, and the rest I look forward to meeting. So, I'm starting from zero where everyone else has got a summer or two under their belt. So I appreciate all the input that you can give me. Looking at the map, I know there are some problems to fix out there. I've already heard that our trails are blocked a lot of times. They're definitely going to need some work. We've got campgrounds, dispersed areas, lakes, and everything else out there. So anything that you can do to help me get moving forward with what we might do to move forward in the future, I appreciate it. And I'll be back there with a pretty blank map for you guys.
Thank you, Heather. I'd like to introduce Erica Caruzas. Erica is our archaeologist for the West Zone. And a lot of people are interested in some of the historic and prehistoric findings that Erica has. And so we'll just turn it over to Erica.
Thanks, Carole. And so archaeology and cultural resources, it's actually not a driver at all for this project. But it is another one of those that it's federally required by law. But what I like with cultural resources and archaeology is it's wonderful finding a site, but it's also even better getting to tell the story afterwards and what we learn out there. So under the National Historic Preservation Act, when we have a federal undertaking, projects such as Red Bull, it's my job to go out and see what's already been recorded and then see what else we can find. And obviously focusing within the units where there's going to be treatments, but also just look in the general area to understand this history. And so far what I've learned, we had about, within the whole project area, 86,000 acres, 85,000 acres, there's about already 48 sites had been recorded. And then part of my work that I do is that I do this background research and found out that there's probably another 50 more sites that are possibly out there, mostly associated, that I found so far, related with historic mining and homestead cabins and what have you. Also some lookouts that we haven't had recorded. This is actually was one of the sites that was on what's called the Bureau of Land Management, the Government Land Office maps. And I looked to that; those were created in the early 1900s, and it had a surveyor that was usually trained out east. Then he'd have 4 to 6 people with them locally, and they would march around the woods setting the section corners. And when they got to a certain area, they said, "Oh yeah, well, William, he lives over here at this cabin, and it's about 100 yards in." So the surveyor would plot it off, go walk in, get X marks the spot for the cabin, and then write the notes in his field notes, and then they just kept going along their way. But as a surveyor, their section lines, they have to be exact. They're the ones that put up the sections and the state line crossing. So this was one of the cabins that I was out with Bruce last summer, and I said, we went and looked at a unit, and we had about a half hour. We didn't feel like spending in the office, so we went and looked for what we were hoping was a cabin. And when we went to this area, we found the sluice box, the shaker box first. Then what was interesting, we then found a bright silver large can, kind of like a juicer can that I use for like tomato sauce and choke cherry jam or choke cherry jellies. And I was like, oh, that's odd. And then if you come back to the table, they'll say I have a rusty old can on my table over there. And we're looking at it, it's like, wow, this looks like a berry picker. that's really cool. So we got a juicer, we got a berry picker, and of course we missed this amazing cabin that's up there. It's only 3 logs high now, but we saw it had 2 windows in it. And I was like, oh my gosh, we got a log cabin with 2 windows? Must have had a lady out here. And so I'm thinking that this miner had the lady with making jams and jellies. And since it's just in 2 Mile, not that far from St. Regis, they just, hiked on out and sold the jams and jellies. So it's those types of stories that I like to, learn about the area. And so as I said, we have about 50 more sites like this. You can go to the next one, that might be like this, that are within this project. And then I think about half of those are within the treatment units. Yes, sir.
I just have one quick question.
Yes.
Now, if you come upon one of these sites,
Mm-hmm.
what is it like, nobody can come within 600 miles of it? Or how is it looked at by you and the Forest Service?
Well, I mean, so what got me into archaeology is that I actually just like being in the woods. And I really like finding old things around there.
And I'm sure we all do,
yeah.
but I'm just saying.
And so no, we don't.
Now,
block them
do you
off or
limit what can be done in that area, or?
If it
in
still
that
has a
specific-
structure like wood features, we don't want it to burn them. We don't want to burn through it. We like to preserve those features. And so that's part of the National Historic Preservation Act is if there's enough of what's there that we can see what was happening, then we can say that is a protected site and it's eligible for the National Historic Register. But let's say it's completely gone, we really can't see anything that's left. We know that something was happening here, but like it's like a can in a bottle. Like do I need to protect that? I probably don't. But if it's like on the verge, there's this other category, it's called not evaluated, where we just don't have enough information to say it's either eligible or not eligible. And then we protect those as well until we can make a full determination if it's protected. Now, no, we don't make any like large buffer saying you can't be here because they're, I don't know, they're part of the coolest things when you're walking around in the woods and you run into a cabin that you had no idea was there. That's my dream day. Every day to find a cabin I didn't know was supposed to be there.
It's just confusing to me as a layperson and a resident that,
now, like,
okay, we find these things all the time, but.
Well, if you do, you can always let me know, and we can always go put X marks the spot, the historic treasure.
Well,
and,
I mean,
and then maybe get it go out. And
is this the same way that we found the Mullen Trail, and did interpretive signs all through this portion of St. Regis?
So yeah, so the Mullen Trail, Carole was definitely a big part of that, but we knew about it.
Did
but
we use you folks to discover that kind of thing, Carole?
Well, because there's a lot of places that people thought were portions of the old Mullen Road, and they ended up not being, and other portions were. So we even used graduate students from the University of Montana to come out and help inventory. Chuck Mead from Alberton did an awful lot to help find portions of the Mullen Road. So, as well as,
So it's not something that we as the public should be afraid of, that if we find a site that we, it's not going to become.
It's your resource too.
Yeah.
You don't want to go to jail.
No, I mean, definitely don't be afraid. And if you do find something, I would love to have a phone call. I mean, that's why I'm here tonight. I'm hoping people can help me X marks the spot the historic treasures out there. So, this was a cabin. We haven't seen this since the picture was taken in 1983. It's a cabin that obviously Bear Creek or Dry Creek. There's one more slide. And, we just want to go see how
Okay,
these
so it's not
work.
anything that we as the public should be afraid of.
Actually, more and more these days, heritage and recreation are partnering up to make it recreational opportunities from a historic perspective. So, we try to work together so that the public can enjoy it, but we preserve the historical nature.
Okay.
Yeah, and then I think there's one more slide.
Like if it was an Indian burial ground or something, you can't do anything in that area.
Well, you'll just get a curse anyway, so
But-
I don't know why you want to mess with Indian burial. I mean,
I'm saying, you might come across bones somewhere.
And you could.
and-
You could.
yeah, I mean, I mean, I've been working pretty exclusively on this district for like 3 or 4 years now, and I have found a few burials, and I'll tell you the truth, I don't like them. I don't like burials, because like I said, there's curses in them. So I find a burial and I will tell someone else as soon as I can.
Railroad workers that were here in this area,
Yep.
you know, who knows what's out there?
Well, miners, and could have been
Absolutely.
trappers, who knows?
Yeah, there's quite a few, and then everyone here knows, I'm sure more than I do, but the Little Joe was just crammed with all sorts of mining and cabins, and so we're hoping that, for me, the Little Joe would be a year this year that we get to go focus on that and see if we can find some more of the cabins and mines that are up there.
So projects like this, like you're showing on the screen, wouldn't preclude a logging company to come in there and cut timber or
Yeah, so
anything
so we
of
work
that
really
nature?
close together. Typically if it's a site so we'll just say if it's a site that's not eligible, we don't need it protected, whatever happens, happens.
No.
And then we'll just lose that piece of history, or we gather all the information that we can from it, and those 3 cans in that bottle, we're good
Okay.
if it gets ran over. But let's say if there is a cabin there, we will work to try to protect it, because it is a nice part of history.
Understood.
Some
I got a little bit more understanding on what.
Yeah, so, and then I try to work together. We were just doing like these big, large buffers for a really long time, but I also see those as just hot spots for when the fire comes through. It's just going to toast it to a crisp if we have all that in there. So I work with Lori and Bruce and the firefighters, and we come in and do training days sometimes and do some thinning around them where we can't get the equipment close enough. But we try to bring it in as close as we can, but not limit it.
So Erica, here tonight in this room, you have people that have been a lifetime here in the St. Regis area, and a number of people that have been here a long time. So probably can tell you quite a lot about the area that you're interested in.
And that's what like I said, that's what I'm here for. So we have these cabins, and they have, half a page of information written on them, and I'm sure there's more. But I like to have more, I like to have more of the story, and we can get it out there.
Thank you, Erica. Okay, to wrap up our presentation, Willie.
I hate to do this, but is it possible to back up to your triangle, the very first?
Oh, the very first
Yeah,
screen?
the very first one you had.
Okay.
I just want to be sure that everybody here, including me, is clear on when we can comment and how. Okay, we're here today and we're on the left side of the triangle.
We are. We're not even, Pat, you can find out where we are. We haven't even got to scoping yet.
Yeah, we're on the left side of the triangle, Willie, and see where the red arrow is on the left side? It's where it says collaboration. That's about where we are. And so what Carole said, we're about a year, almost a year until we get to our scoping on the other side there.
So will you officially solicit a comment period yet on this project?
Oh, yes.
Once we have a proposed action, that's all scoping, there'll be a comment period on that, and then also on the environmental document.
So how do we comment, or how does the public comment as we go through the left side of this? You said that's when you'd like to get comments?
And that's what Carole's trying to generate tonight, and have field trips. We're talking about field trips this summer, another meeting in the fall, and having that kind of discussion with folks.
I'm sure you don't want this huge influx of phone calls every day on this, so how do we respond from now until we get to the top of your triangle?
Okay, so what we did, Willie, is last year when we met here and we introduced the project and you people went to the tables, we took comments and Pat summarized those. We have those in the files. We took comments from the field trip that we took, and we have those. And we're going to keep track of comments as you go around that you've already given us. And then when you go around to the individual tables, the people there are going to make sure that they capture your comments. So we're gathering comments all through this collaborative part over on the left. And where do we go from here? So we're planning to have a couple of field trips during the summer, because we have one more opportunity with our specialists out in the field to continue to work with you folks that have a great interest in this area to help us develop this project as we go along, and then probably September have a public meeting to kind of wrap that together before we go out with scoping in February of next year. So we're continuing to gather public comments. And people have sent, that couldn't be here tonight, but they've spent a lot of time out there during the summer. They sit down and compose some notes or a letter. They send it in, and we're keeping that all in the file.
So that can come anytime during this whole process?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And then, of course, you'll have official time. That's gonna help us develop this project as we go, and then there will be official scoping that you'll have another opportunity to.
So during the official scoping, we can still influence the project?
Yes.
Okay.
And actually, and Pat, correct me if I'm wrong, isn't it from the comments that we get from scoping and everything that we've gathered up to that point, that time, that's going to help us develop our some of our actions, alternatives.
Alternatives to that proposed action.
Yeah, we'll have a proposed action, and I'm hoping that all of this over on this side of the screen, Willie, is going to help us come up with that proposed action.
Okay. So we can all comment ongoing?
Yes.
Okay.
And that's why I'm trying to get comments from you all early in the process instead of at the end of projects, where it's really hard for us to do much with them.
Right.
And so no matter how we go, whether we're looking at fire or veg treatment or recreation, we got to get there. And so I'm going to ask Brian Story, is our engineer that's most familiar with the transportation in this area and the road system. So Brian's just going to give us a few of his comments. And a lot of you know a lot about the roads too, because in the comments that we've gotten so far, when we asked you people how you use it or how often you use it, we had a lot of people responded in the summertime. They're up there in Red Bull almost some several times a week. And a lot of people commented, several times a week in the evenings, where do you go? You take a drive up Little Joe, you run up Ward Creek, you go up 2 Mile. So you people know a lot about that area. And that's why we really want to learn from you and get your ideas as well. Brian?
Yeah, so...
And if you can't hear Brian, raise your hand.
Yeah,
He has kind of softer voice.
So I wanted to talk about a couple particulars in the Red Bull project area. I wanted to kind of give everyone an update where we're at on the North Fork Little Joe for the paving proposal, for kind of where we're at for improvements to that road. And then I also wanted to just summarize our transportation analysis process that we've kind of conducted the preliminary steps of. So on the North Fork of the Little Joe, we put in a proposal. It's a flat proposal, federal land access program proposal. And what that was intended to do was to bring all the agencies together to look at if we were to be able to pave Little Joe, we want to get all of federal highways on board with the project. We want to make sure that all the regulatory agencies are are on board with the project, and to just kind of look through all those considerations. And that's what the proposal was for. We put that in last year, and we did not get that funding for that study. And so that would have been kind of a first step towards a potential paving project. So we haven't been briefed on why we didn't get it, and so we're still kind of waiting for that. And that's kind of where that is sitting at this point. Definitely understand the benefits of paving from a road management standpoint. But what we have also done is we've gotten a resurfacing project put on our regional. It's a capital improvement program, a list that it's a funding source for large road projects, large forest projects in general, but it includes roads. And so right now we're on the list for a And that's just for resurfacing, it's not for paving, but it would be to resurface the Little Joe. We're on the list for survey and design for 2020 and potentially for resurfacing on 2021. And that's preliminary. We're on the list, it changes. We don't know what our CIP program, that changes with federal funding and USDA funding. And so that's very much up in the air, but we're on the list, hopefully headed that direction. And that wouldn't preclude paving, but it would give us a chance to manage that road better for sediment, manage it better for being able to maintain for forest users and also, and just traffic for forest users. So that's kind of where we're at on the North Fork of Little Joe. And I also wanted to summarize our transportation analysis process. And so for each of the large project areas that we've done over the last few years, that'd be like Cedar Tom, for example, 12 Tamarack, Jamcracker. What we do when we analyze the roads is we look at, and we did the same in Red Bull, we'll look at every single road in the project area. So in Red Bull, there's 580 miles of mapped road, plus or minus, and 530 of those are under Forest Service jurisdiction. And so we'll look at all those road segments and analyze and evaluate what the access needs are on those roads. So if those roads access, like for agency use for like timber management is one thing we look at. We look at if they're needed for fire access, that kind of thing. And then if they're needed or what they're used for public access, human uses. And then we also look at what the impacts are on each of the road segments. So then that's primarily aquatics. We're looking at those impacts, and then wildlife for the road itself and for the traffic and what kind of impact that has on wildlife. And so we combine all those for each road segment and then just make a determination of if we're going to change either travel management on the road, keep the road as is, and then for roads that are not on the forest system, which about half of the roads under Forest Service jurisdiction are not on our system now, we'll try to make a determination of if we're going to, in a way, leave them as is and decommission them or add them to our system. And so the preliminary results are on the back table. It's typical to past projects where there aren't a lot of very few travel management changes that we're proposing. So the way you use the forest, the road system, in general would not change much. There is the aquatics opportunities that those are that's kind of the big potential change. But aside from that, it would be very few changes. There would be roads that we would add to the system that we could be used. They're not system roads now, but could be used in the future for logging systems. And we want to add those to the system for potential future forest management. And then there's a few roads that are like going to dispersed sites that we don't have on the system. And most of those are proposing to add to the system, be open and do a little bit of management to reduce the impacts to streams on those roads. So that's kind of a brief overview. And I guess to be clear, where we're at in the process, we're not finished yet. The way this works is we come up as an interdisciplinary team, and with public input, we come up with just a proposal that we would give to the decision maker, and we're still finalizing what that proposal would be like. So we're very much, I'm very much interested in continuing to get, your comments on how you use the roads, and very open to that. Yeah.
Carole? Brian, how do you consider the economic benefit of a road to the local community?
I guess we don't. That's more like, I guess, the economic benefit of roads to the local community. We definitely consider, I guess, the road, what kind of access they provide for forest management. Economics isn't a huge driver in terms of, we definitely need to consider what it takes for the agency to manage the roads. And, but the kind of larger, are you the larger like recreation dollars that come into the community,
I'm
that
just
would
talking
be
about
outside of.
the use by the local community for that road and the benefit to
Yeah.
attract recreational dollars
Yeah,
for our community.
the economics piece doesn't play into roads analysis so much, but the access benefit definitely does. We consider the benefit that the entire road system has to both like the kind of intangible, your ability to access the forest, but also to kind of the economy. But that's more as on a kind of road by road, not so much a strict dollar analysis that would go into the transportation analysis. But we definitely consider the value of that access to the public.
But Carole, in the overall decision, certainly, we have to consider, the importance of roads to the communities, the value to communities, and access. So certainly.
Yeah, and we'll also look at our specific project proposal, and we have to do economics on that as well, and what's feasible to actually implement in terms of improvements or anything, activities that we would do on the road.
Thank you, Brian.
So without that grant funding, was the paving on that little road just done?
We're going to continue to look for opportunities. Nate Cagle, the assistant forest engineer, was talking to him just the other day, and one of the things that Nate mentioned is President Trump keeps talking about, he's going to put money into infrastructure, roads, bridges, that sort of thing. And of course, we don't know what that's going to look like, but we're certainly going to be watching. There may be opportunity, since we have such an interest and a collaborative approach here. Who knows, if there is some money available that way, maybe the little Joe would have some priority to get some money for paving. And we just don't know what that program is going to look like yet. But we're going to keep watching for opportunities. Yes.
And I guess to follow up a little bit, Carole, I mean, we didn't get this one, but that doesn't mean that we haven't been briefed. We don't know why. That doesn't preclude us from maybe applying again. So it's not like dead in the water.
That's the first step, though, was to do that study with the interagencies.
It's not essential, but we don't really want to go through what we went through before and get something designed and not have it fail.
Did you guys come up with an estimate on what the cost of that would be? You must have.
It's millions of dollars.
Huh?
It's, I don't remember what the exact number was. It's
Did you remember
it's over an order of magnitude over resurfacing.
That'd be something that'd be interesting to know. Yeah.
Rather than the grant, when we look at timber dollars to pay for that paving, I know we talked about funding the last go around on the tour. When we look at it economically as harvesting more timber to pay for that road.
Take a pretty good chunk.
And we're definitely,
It's there.
I don't mean that, we're definitely, as part of the resurfacing CIP proposal, we're trying to leverage as much of that. We at the Forest Service has deposits for surface replacement, and we're trying to leverage as many of those funds as we can to match that kind of there's a CIP pot, and we're looking to combine those kind of timber generated dollars that we have to leverage that kind of project. But that doesn't, it's kind of a drop in the bucket when it comes to paving. But it would be a big help for a CIP gravel kind of project.
Okay, thank you, Brian.
Carole, this is way off from the roads and everything, but I'm an old timer. We moved here in '66 and raised our kids up until we left for Alaska. But we used to take our kids up to Moore Lake and go fishing and camp up there. Go up to Silver Lake and camp up there and go fishing. This summer we had our granddaughters here. And we went up to Moore Lake. There's no way the kids could fish there. There's so many logs in the lakes. Is there anything that you guys are going to try to do to improve access to our lakes
as far as for dig. You couldn't even get a boat in there, where we used to put a rubber raft in and fish. Is that part of this project at all?
I think that'd be a comment that Heather, and I'll visit with Heather and make sure we get that, because that's exactly some of the comments that she'd be wanting to know. You know, we have a piece of equipment up there,
Yeah, I
pretty
don't
close,
know.
where we can snag some of those out, would be an
Yeah, but those
opportunity.
logs are just, you know, they're way out, and you don't dare, you know, you just can't cast over them. You'd never get your lures back in again.
There's a lot more in Diamond Lake than there used to be as well.
Yeah, I haven't been to Diamond for a while.
Okay, I'm gonna get you up and get you moving. You've been sitting long enough.